welcome to the first ever Rod's podcast with my co-host, Mike McKnight, infamous endurance ultra marathoner. And I think they need to come up with a better name for ultra marathoner, because you're much more than an ultra marathoner. Like a mega marathoner, a mega ultra. Is there an actual name for what you do after 100 miles?
As of right now, no. Anything over a marathon's an ultra.
There we go. So there, you heard it here. Mike is a mega ultra marathoner, which means you run further than 100 miles at a time.
Yeah, it just means you're crazier. And then we got Brady Murray, who everybody knows, Rod's founder and president. Tell us a little bit about that, Brady. Why did you decide to start a nonprofit with the hopes of benefiting children with Down syndrome?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll share two important points on this. There was a time in my life that I was probably in my early 30s, and I was working extremely hard. I'm a firm believer in all in, like whatever you're going to do, just go all in. And so I was all in my career, and I was all in with my family, and I was all in with some outdoors excursions that I was pursuing with various things. But I just felt inside of me a need to do more. And I mean, to the point I get even emotional thinking about it now, to the point where I remember we were living in Boise at the time, and I would go to Utah a lot for work. And I remember driving from Tremonton to Boise, and I remember calling Andrea and just telling her multiple times, like, I just feel like I need to be doing more. And that was difficult for Andrea to hear, because we had very young children. We had a special needs son, Nash, and we were working hard. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, you are working your guts out. And like, I'm working my guts out with these kids. What are you talking about with do more? And I just couldn't put my finger on it. And it was like that for a good year. And I sought it out, and I pondered about it. I prayed about it. I thought about it all the time. And I will never forget the day that I got my answer on what more was supposed to be. And it was actually to start Rods. It was. And it came to me in the wee hours of a Sunday morning. I remember I had just woke up. It was still dark outside. And it came to me so clear. And I knew exactly what it was going to look like. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. And that's how it was. And so it was pretty incredible to be able to see that come to pass. I do have to share, I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, meaning I didn't plan on doing an Ironman, I'll tell you that, or starting some crazy endurance running stuff, but I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that was to help these kids. And so that's, I'd say, the story before the real story. The real story started in 2007 when my wife and I were expecting our first child. And we had a daughter who we love, Brinley, and we were expecting our first son. And I will never forget, it was the heat of July, and we just built a new home, and I was pushing to get the home done and moved in before Andrea had our baby. And it was me pushing that actually put her into labor. That night, the very first night that we moved into our new home, Andrea went into labor, and she woke me up. It was 2 a.m, and it was just like a movie scene. And she said, Brady, I think it's time. And I'm like, let's do it. And so I jump up. She's like, I'm having some contractions. We need to go to the hospital, but like, we don't need to go right now. So I ran in, I got the stuff, and I jumped in the shower. I knew it was going to be a long day, and I came out, and she was like in full-blown labor on the bed.
Oh my
just
gosh.
Like, I'm thinking I'm going to deliver this kid right here. Here we go. And so I grew up in Preston, Idaho. That's why my heart's in Idaho. And I thought, all right, I know how to handle this. Like, I grew up in Preston. Like, I've seen cows delivered before, little calves, and I've seen horses. I helped deliver a horse once. Like, a little baby can't be any harder than that, right? So
I'm
I
sure
run
your
into
wife doesn't like that analogy.
and she's just like, and I run into the garage. I get my headlamp. I get my Leatherman. I come in there. I'm like, here we go, right? And luckily it was just a contraction, and it had passed. And she's like, I'm good, just get me to the hospital. And so we went to the hospital, and she did amazing. And right around 10 o'clock, I saw my son, Nash, for the very first time. And I was doing what dads do, making a video, and I was taking pictures, and I was just enjoying the moment. And it was probably 10 minutes after he was born, I noticed that the doctor and the nurses were like super quiet. And in fact, they were like talking amongst each other in a quiet voice so that I didn't hear them. And after a few minutes, the doctor came over and put his arm around me, and he said, Brady, we think that your son has Down syndrome. And that was the first time I had heard that. And I
heard Down syndrome?
I didn't know that he had Down syndrome, right? And so I was pretty emotional, and I was very scared as to what that meant. And you have these visions for what you think for your firstborn son or any son or daughter. And, that included captain of the football team and following in dad's footsteps to come into the business. And we were going to play a ton of baseball and hike big mountains and do all that stuff. And for the first time, I thought, like, that's not a reality. This is different. And I worried considerably about his health, and I didn't know what that meant. And then I had just a flood of emotion come over me in that moment, because I knew that Nash had Down syndrome, but I knew my wife didn't know. And I had to go tell her, right? And so she had just gone through labor and given birth, and like, she's obviously just spent. And I go over to her and I kneel down, and I just remember clearly, I whisper in her ear and I say, Andrea, the doctor just told me they think Nash has Down syndrome. And she did not skip a beat. It didn't matter. She's like, great. Where is he?
Let me see
Can
him.
I hold him? And how she reacted and the peace of mind that gave me, I knew that this was going to work out. Like, I knew that it was going to be something special. And over the next few days, I spent time with Nash, and I had many various experiences and impressions that came to my mind that not only was this going to be special, but I had been entrusted with a very, very special soul, that I got to be his father, that I was blessed to get to be his father, and that I was probably going to learn much more from him than I would ever teach him. And so fast forward to today, Nash is 13, going on 14 this year, and that is absolutely the case, no question. So that's a little of the background around Rods, and there's definitely some more details that I can share at another time.
And Nash is doing good, I might point out. I met him a week ago. You took him hiking up just a canyon here in Utah, and we ran into each other there. Yep,
that was pretty fun. We for Christmas, we gave our kids the gift of going camping at a yurt and some winter camping, and we had a 4-mile hike up this canyon, and we had to gain about 1,100 feet elevation, and we had 5 of our 7 children with us, ages 14 to 6, and those boys, I have 2 special needs sons now that I'm sure will be a great topic for another podcast, but Nash is 13 and Cooper's 9, and then Brinley's 14 and Ridge is 11 and Mason's 6. But Cooper and Nash, my 13 and my 9-year-old, are my special needs boys, and those boys did it. They made it up there, and they had to hoof it, but they did it.
Yeah, it's a big hike.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun, too, because in retrospect, you said that, you have these visions of what your first son would be like, tossing the football to each other or the baseball. Fast forward today, and like, you can still do those things.
Yeah,
that didn't really change a lot.
Yep, we do, which is pretty fun. I have found a love and a passion for getting to do hard things with Nash that people probably didn't think that he was going to get to do, and that maybe I didn't think that he was going to get to do. One thing that we're working on right now, I'm a big outdoorsman. I love hunting. And one thing that I'm doing right now is Nash is getting his hunter safety.
That's awesome.
And we're practicing shooting, and he's going to be hopefully someday get to do his own deer hunt, maybe even this year. So,
yeah, some deer jerky.
Yep, some deer jerky.
Yeah.
Yep. Big thing for the boys right now is they're huge Dude Perfect fans. I don't know if you ever watched Dude Perfect, but there's all these battles and these challenges, and they compete, and they're really loud, and they celebrate when they win. And like, you come to the Murray household and you've got Dad leading the pack with all these boys doing full on Dude Perfect battles.
That's awesome.
And the girls in the house think it's ridiculous. So
if you haven't heard of Dude Perfect, go check them out. They're fun to watch.
They are.
That's great. One thing that you said that got me thinking, so I didn't know this, but there's actually people out there who aren't aware of what Down syndrome is.
Yeah.
I grew up with a friend whose brother has Down syndrome. One of my good friends just had a daughter a few years ago who has Down syndrome. And then my sisters, who actually adopted a Down syndrome daughter, which would be another good episode.
That's going to be a really good episode. That's some pretty special divine intervention on how we came together.
Yeah, that'd be a fun topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, my sister, she grew up volunteering at an organization up at Utah State, a college where I'm from, that had I don't know the right word for it. It's not a daycare, but it's a place where people with Down syndrome can come and hang out for the day.
Okay, that makes sense.
They go to dances at night and stuff like that. So I was introduced to it at a young age. So it never occurred to me that there might be people who aren't aware of what Down syndrome is. To take that a step further, I really like that you were worried at first when Nash was born. You didn't know what life would be like. And then fast forward today, and you've actually adopted another child who has Down syndrome.
Yeah, we have. I can share a little bit about the motivation behind doing that. And it actually connects back to that feeling that I had in my early 30s when I just felt a desire to do more. And Andrea and I at the time had, Brindley, we had Nash, we had Ridge, we had Mason, we had 4 children. And there was, there was some complications when Mason was born to where we knew we were never going to have another child, biologically at least. And Andrea and I had seen all these families adopt these children, and what a blessing that was in their life. And so Mason was probably 2 or 3, and we thought, well, what if we adopted? And we said, that actually feels right. And we started to explore that. And as we started to explore what that may look like, a very small inkling came to mind one morning very early in a quiet moment that suggested that maybe I adopt, or that Andrea and I adopt a child with Down syndrome. And it was like, no, we have a child with Down syndrome. And I shared that thought with Andrea, and she said the same thing, no, we already have one. We were planning on adopting just a typical child. And as we pondered that over the following weeks and months, that desire to do more and to really push ourselves and get ourselves outside of our comfort zone and do things that we maybe thought weren't possible, continued to build inside of us. And it finally came to a point where we seriously pondered that, and we prayed about that, and we knew that we were supposed to adopt a child with Down syndrome. And so it was like, here we go, let's do it. Kind of like gearing up for a big race that you don't know if you can finish.
Just jump in.
We were fortunate to adopt Cooper about a year later, and he's from Tianjin, China. He was 4 when we got him. And that was, almost 5 years ago. And he's been awesome. That boy is the life of the party. He's a great addition to the family. So
that was after Rods was organized.
Yep. Yeah.
5 years ago.
We were a number of years into Rods at that point in time.
So just out of curiosity, I feel like the people who are listening to this podcast would know who Reese's Rainbow is, but did you use Reese's Rainbow? Or?
We did. We actually found Cooper through Reese's Rainbow. And so Reese's Rainbow has been a wonderful partner of ours and a wonderful advocate and a resource to us since the inception of Rods. And so when we felt like we should adopt a child with Down syndrome, we actually went to Reese's Rainbow and looked at their website to see what children that they had listed, and that's where we found Cooper, ironically enough.
That's great. Being able to take the core value of the organization that you founded and applying it to your family.
Yeah.
That's great. Another question that I wanted to ask you, so the official date of Rods was founded, when was that, roughly?
Well, there's the official date as it relates to the IRS 501c3 being finalized and established, which I think was May of 13. In my mind, the inspiration for Rods came in November of 2011. So that experience that I shared in the morning on the idea of saving these kids and helping these kids came then, and then the idea around actually doing it from the endurance sports standpoint, I would say, was Q1 of 2012.
Okay, so 7 to 9 years, depending on where you look at it.
Yeah, I definitely would put it in that 8 to 9 year range for sure.
Okay. So ironically enough, the company that I was with before coming to Rods was Ultra Footwear.
Yep.
It's a company that was founded here in Utah.
Yep.
Not too long before Rods was founded. They've been around for 11 years or so. And so when I started working for them, they were younger than what Rods is right now.
Yeah.
And so I've had the opportunity to see them grow into what it is today. Like, they were recently sold to VF Corp, who owns the North Face, Vans, Smartwool, like a lot of large companies.
Yep.
And I asked my former boss this a year or so ago, and I want to ask you the same thing. But when you started Rods 8 to 9 years ago, looking at where it's at today, is this what you envisioned it as?
It's a great question. It's a very deep question for me. And you'll find with me in this podcast, I'll be very transparent. I feel like Rods got off to an incredible start and continued to grow and build and continues to grow and build. And I feel like we've done everything that we were supposed to do up to this point. And I'm extremely thankful for that. We have dozens and dozens of children that we've been able to save and that are home now. We've raised, well in excess of $1 million plus, really with that target closer to pushing 2 million now. And I'm extremely thankful for that. But I feel something inside go back to that desire to do more. And I feel like there's still a song that hasn't been sung, that I feel like we're on the verge of just getting started. I mean that. And I feel like the last 8-9 years have been a preparation for what's to come in the future and in the very near future. So that's where I'm at with that one.
That's a good answer. One thing that you haven't really touched on, though, is what do you feel has gotten Rods to where it is today? So
I learned this actually when I was younger, in my late teenage years. I had an opportunity to serve a church mission for my church for 2 years in Peru. And I learned something in Peru. I learned that when somebody allows themselves to get caught up in a cause bigger than themselves, that they will witness miracles, that they will witness literal miracles. And I've found that with Rods, that truly is the core of how we are where we are now. And why we've had some of the experiences that we've had is because it's nothing short of miracle after miracle taking place that has opened up the doors for us. And that's really the core of where I feel like a lot of the success has had, and the cause that we've really got caught up into. And it may make sense for us to take a moment to talk about that cause, but the cause that we're caught up in is literally saving orphans who are on the verge of dying in these orphanages that are tucked away in these countries and in these areas that nobody's ever heard of and that nobody knows about. Like, that's what we do, is we go find these orphans and we find them a family and we rescue them from those orphanages and we give them that forever family. And so that's really the cause. And I found in getting caught up in that particular cause more than almost any other cause I think I've ever seen is there's a lot of divine intervention that's going to play into that when you allow yourself to get caught up in the cause of saving orphans that have disabilities. It's pretty unique to see what takes place when that takes place. So
I would agree with that. In the short time that I've been here, it's been amazing to see the more involved you are with it, like the more catching it is. Mm-hmm. Like, me and my wife right now, we're in no point where we can adopt right now. Mm-hmm. We just had our second child a few months ago, and our two kids are more than we can handle right now as a young couple. Yep. But like, just like going through, Rods has a list of children right now that we have funding for. And just like going through, reading their files, doing social media posts on them and seeing videos of them, like they're adorable little children. And it's sad to realize that, one of the things that you've said many times is that a lot of these orphans phase out and they get sent to mental institutions, and that's where they spend the rest of their lives, simply because they have a disability. And like, just watching these videos of them and seeing their smiles and their laughs, and we just put up a video on social media of a child named Nash, and he was dribbling a basketball and laughing. Like, they have feelings. They're just as happy as we are. They're even more happy than we are. Like, if anything that I've learned in my life being around children, people with Down syndrome, is they're purely happy about anything. And so it's just like, the more you pay attention to it and the more you get involved, like your heart just like melts completely, and it really is something that you want to get involved with.
Well, it's fun to be able to talk about this as again, this is our first ever podcast, and I'm just having idea after idea after idea that we're going to be able to share with our listeners about Down syndrome and about what it means to get to be associated with these special children. I had a funny experience this week. In fact, this is a recurring experience. I do all my workouts in the morning, and I, for whatever reason, am just drenched when I come upstairs. And whenever I come upstairs, the kids are typically having breakfast and getting ready for school, and I'm just drenched. And maybe a year or two ago, I came upstairs, and Nash loves to give hugs. And so one thing you'll learn with kids that have Down syndrome is they love to give hugs, and adults that have Down syndrome love to give hugs. And Nash saw me and he came to give me a hug, and I'm like, sweaty hug. And he looks at me and he goes, sweaty hug. And he just gives me a great big hug. And as soon as I did that, Cooper saw that and he's like, sweaty hug. So they come running up, they give Dad a great big hug. So literally every morning I come upstairs now and I'm just drenched, and Nash is so excited to give me a great big sweaty hug. And then as soon as he gives me a hug and Cooper gives me a hug, they all start pointing to the other kids, give Ridge a sweaty hug, give Mason a sweaty hug. And those kids run. They're like, I don't want anything to do with it. Give Mom a sweaty hug. So that's a little insight into some of the fun things that we have in the Murray household, having these special needs kids there.
The joys of getting caught up in that.
Yeah.
Let's touch a little bit about the actual name of the organization. Mm-hmm. So ROD stands for Racing for Orphans with Down Syndrome. What happened to make this organization focused on racing to save orphans with Down syndrome? So
back to that November 2011, Sunday morning early, was very clear. The inspiration that was so clear to me was, you need to help these children that are in these orphanages. And the way that you do that is you have to get adoption grants for them. And so I started to research it, and sure enough, that was exactly right. There's a lot of families that want to adopt these children. They don't have $30,000 to $40,000 laying around to be able to do it. And I had this impression that told me very clearly, if you raise $15,000 to $20,000 and put that out there as an adoption grant for these kids, these families will come out of the woodwork to come and get them. And so Andrea and I said, let's try it. So we went on to Reese's Rainbow. We chose a child, Eli, who is at the time was tucked away in a little orphanage in Lithuania. He was 4 years old. We contacted the adoption agency. We asked them if he was still available, and they said nobody's inquired about this kid in 4 years, like ever. In fact, they said we're not even sure he's like eligible to be adopted because nobody's done the work to go get him. And we said, well, we're going to try and raise money for this kid, and we're going to try and save this kid. So it was right before Christmas. We told all our family and friends, like, don't get us gifts. In fact, here's this little boy, and we want to raise money for him. And we thought, let's see what we can raise, $1,000, $2,000. Back to the concept of getting caught up in a cause, we witnessed a miracle. There were I still remember these people very, very dear to me that came forward and adopted a lot of money and did some pretty special things. That's another topic for a podcast that we should talk about, just some of those things that they did. But we raised I think it was almost $20,000 for Eli in that 30-day period. And we put that out there. We published that. And within 30 days, keep in mind this kid had 4 years of not a soul inquiring about him. Within 30 days, a family had committed to adopt him, and he is home with that family. They live in Indiana. I love them so much. Little Eli is amazing, and his mom, Jamie, is amazing. And I've seen Eli. I've held him in my arms. I had such a wonderful experience with that, too, that I want to share sometime. But it was proof, right? And we got to the end of that, and we had Eli that was committed to be adopted to, and we're like, let's do it again. And so we started brainstorming. We can only go to our family and friends so many times to give us money. What are some other things that we should do? And my wife said, hey, you have always wanted to do an Ironman. Why don't you do an Ironman to raise money and to raise awareness on behalf of these kids? Now, an Ironman, for those that are not aware, is a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then you finish it off with running a marathon, and you do all that consecutively in the same day. When she said that, I looked at her and I said, why don't you do an Ironman and I'll support you? But the truth was I had some aspirations to do an Ironman. I had dabbled in endurance events before. And when I say endurance events, I'm talking like a triathlon where you swim to the end of the pool, run around or ride around the block, and then run to the end of the street type of triathlon. And in fact, I had even tried to do a half Ironman before, and it literally almost killed me. Like I got a picture of me like almost dead after doing that. And so the thought of like doing one of those, like a double, that wasn't happening. But I thought about it, for a few days, and I thought, you know what? If me doing an Ironman means that what happened to Eli happens to another kid, I'll do it. Like, I'll go do it. And that's actually where the idea of racing came into play, was Andrea saying, get off your duff and go run an Ironman.
Go race.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And when you started that Ironman, did you have the name Racing for Orphan?
Nope.
No, it came after that?
Nope. When we started the thought of like, hey, let's do an Ironman, that's where the idea of saying, and we started to promote that, and we got a lot of traction from that. That's when the idea of saying, hey, like, this is actually the thought that we could do, is create an organization that's geared around racing and endurance racers and people that want to run 5Ks or marathons or mega ultras, as we've called them, that they could come and actually race on behalf of these children and to help these children to be saved.
That's great. And I just want to point out too that I've only been with the organization for 2 months now. But I have spoken to Eli's mom. It's Jamie, right?
Yep.
Eli is 14 now, if I remember what she said, and she sent a picture of him holding it's like a taco kit. She's saying that he loves his taco nights, and he's just really, really enjoying life right now, and it's kind of fun to see the fruit of all of that.
I have to share a cool experience that I had with Eli. We were about a year and a half into the organization, and Eli was home. Eli was probably 5 or 6 years old, and we actually held a rods event out in Indianapolis where Eli lives, and we raced in the Indianapolis 500 or whatever it is, where you run around the track. It's a pretty cool race, half marathon, and we had a number of athletes out there, and so we held a banquet, and we had Eli come. And I remember we had all our athletes there, and we had Eli there, and it was so cool to see him, and he's just a happy-go-lucky kid, and it was so emotional and special to think that, like, that kid was our first one that we were able to help, and what a special kid it was that we got to help. So I was in front of the group, and I was telling the Rod story. And I got super emotional just seeing Eli there, and to tell the story and to think how far we had come in such a short period of time. And in front of everybody, Eli got out of his seat and ran up to the front of the room and gave me a great big hug, like was comforting me, right? And I thought, like, all this time, I was going to rescue you, and like, really, this little guy's rescuing me, right? And that just, I think, was the experience and the heart of, like, really how special this work is, that now he's home, and these kids don't just come home and become non-contributors, right? These kids come home and they are very much a contributor. And one of the phrases and things that I shared when I ran the Ironman World Championship in 2012 is, it's not the family getting a kid is a big blessing, but that's not the biggest blessing. The biggest blessing is, or I said it backwards, but you get it. Like, it's the family that's receiving that kid, right? That kid getting a family's nice, but it's that family that's getting that kid that's the biggest blessing right there. So love that little Eli guy. I need to go see him. He's probably as tall as me now. He's a pretty tall kid.
Picture. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a tall kid.
I'm glad you said that, same, because I was going to ask you to tell everybody that. So if you were to tell families listening right now, like, anything, the one benefit that comes from adopting a child with Down syndrome, would it be that they're the greatest blessing?
Yep. And that goes back to, why we really were motivated to want to adopt Cooper, is we've seen the influence that Nash has had on our family, and the calming effect and the love and just that tender spirit that you get to have all day in your home and that you get to surround yourself with. And we thought, why wouldn't we want more of that in our family? And having those children in our home and being able to surround ourselves with them makes us better. And I'm a core belief of mine is that the person you become is determined by the books you read and the people that you surround yourself with. And what better person to get to surround yourself with than a special person that has Down syndrome.
And so on that note, there's like, everybody that's listening, everybody has different backgrounds. Some people are in my situation, mine and my wife's situation, where we could see ourselves adopting, but it's just not the right time in our lives. We have people who just financially can't afford it, even with the help of these grants that we're putting together. But I would say that one of the ways that people can help out the most right now, and it doesn't require that much commitment, is just letting people know that we have it used to be 12, but we have one of the kids whose family's committed to him now.
Yeah.
Little Emmett.
Yep.
Over in the China region.
I'm excited about Emmett.
Yeah, but we have 11 kids right now who have funding to their name. We want to bring them home. So even if you can't adopt yourselves, just like let people know that we're an organization that's here to help out and that these kids need to come home.
That's one of the motivations why we wanted to do this podcast is with races essentially being shut down for the last year and just very few outlets to be able to get our name out there and get these kids' stories out there. We thought let's do a podcast because we do have a number of children that are ready and are eligible to be adopted, that have an adoption grant and are ready for that family to take that step of courage and to follow that feeling to do more that is probably in their heart.
And I imagine we'll highlight those kids like on this podcast.
We will.
I think that Brady and I still aren't 100% sure where we're going to run with this podcast. We just know we're going to run with it.
Yep.
But highlighting these children is something that I have interest of, and I'm sure you do as well. But yeah, we definitely just want to bring them home. So I think that the final question I have for you is, and if you feel like you're in a position to share this, but what are the goals for Rods in the future?
Yeah. The goal for Rods in the future is the same goal that it was when we started. And that was to find a home for every single kid that has Down syndrome that is in an orphanage right now. And I don't know how we'll do that, but I know that when we allow ourselves to get caught up in a cause bigger than ourselves, that we'll witness miracles. And that's what I'm running on.
I like that. I'd say in the 2 months that I've been here, I've caught on to that saying that you've been saying a few times in this episode, that things will work out when you're caught up in a good cause.
Well, I've got to say, Mike, it was nothing short of just a tremendous blessing and in its own way a miracle that we've had you join Rods. And to be able to see the work that you've been able to do and coupling that with the many wonderful people that are with us now and that have been with us in the past, it's incredible to have you on board. And I'm excited to be able to switch chairs and actually start to ask you a lot of questions about your endurance running, because I'm not kidding you, listeners at home, we're talking with somebody that is redefining what is possible in the endurance running space. And so very, very thankful to have Mike as part of the team. And it just so happens that he's incredible from a professional standpoint in the work that he's doing for the organization as a very important integral employee as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Here at the end of this episode, I think it'd be important for us just to give a shout out and a thanks to the people who have been helping the organization financially. In the years that we've been an organization, it sounds like we have some 2 major contributors right now, organizations. Would you like to give them a shout out?
I would. And in fact, we're going to do a great big old podcast on these guys. And in particular, this first one, Rods is fueled by Idaho potatoes. And I tell you, in the very inception, Frank and his team came forward and they had confidence in us when we weren't anything but just a vision and a hope and a dream. And they have been an incredible supporter and backer for all these years. And we wouldn't be where we are right now without Idaho potatoes. And we're also extremely thankful for the Sorensen Foundation and their vision and belief in us as an organization and the amazing contributions that they've made to our organization on behalf of these children. So huge shout out to those 2.
And probably a huge shout out to the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who have donated over the years.
Yeah.
It's a large number, I imagine.
It's a huge number.
Yeah.
And it there's another incredible thought and idea of sharing a little bit around some of these donors, because there's been some pretty special donors that would actually be pretty fun to have on the podcast and allow them to share their own stories.
We'd love that. We need content.
That's right.
We need people to talk with.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, unless you have any more questions, I think we can wrap this up.
I think that's a great first take. So
awesome.
Let's do it.
Let's end it.